So at the heart, am I on? Just double check. Yeah. So at the heart of our gospel reading today is a relationship between two men, Jesus and Peter. Now this is a rather fraught relationship. If you know your Bible, which I am sure you do, you know that Peter and Jesus have had a good relationship, but sometimes bumpy. Peter is like that student in class who always has his hand up, but is right only half the time. Peter is Jesus' first disciple, the first one he called to say, leave your fishing nets, same ones he maybe has now come back to, but leave your fishing nets and come follow me. I'm going to do that a lot. I'm going to try it better. Peter has wanted to be right so much. Peter has been eager to please Jesus, leaving his nets, following, listening to the parables and the stories and the teachings. Peter has that lovely moment when Jesus asks, who do the people say that I am? And they have lots of answers. And then Jesus says, but who do you say that I am? Suddenly, everyone is silent, except for Peter, who says, Lord, you are the Messiah, the Christ. Everyone takes a big sigh of relief because Peter got it right. Oh, good. But then Peter is there at the Last Supper when Jesus says, one of you who has traveled with me for this whole time, one of you who loves me dearly, one of my closest 12, one of you will betray me. And Peter says, but definitely not I, Lord. There's no way it's going to be me, right? Jesus has to be like, yeah, you're not the one I was talking about, but we know the story, that the whole climax of Peter's journey with Jesus, his whole story of being this faithful follower, doing everything right, trying to make Jesus happy, having the right answer that Jesus is the Messiah, and then when rubber hits the road, when it gets hard, Peter denies him 3 times. When Jesus is about to be put on trial, Peter's great line is to say, I have no clue who that guy is. Ouch. It's like its own betrayal. And so this relationship, as Jesus and Peter sit on the beach side, is fraught. It's complicated. It's not easy necessarily. And it makes me wonder about the relationships in our lives that are fraught and complicated and not easy all the time. Perhaps you have loved ones, families, or friends, people who you turn to and you've trusted for years and years, but then once the rubber hit the road, when the going got tough, they were nowhere in sight. Perhaps you know what it's like when those disciples were fishing, and I'm not a fisher, but when the disciples are fishing all night and they catch nothing. Perhaps you know those relationships where you've poured so much time and energy into them, and yet there comes a point where you realize that I'm not getting anything in return. There are no fish in this water. Those relationships where it becomes so difficult, you feel so betrayed and let down and disappointed that we end up just estranged. And I wonder what it's like for you when you get to that place in relationship. Because relationships are hard. I know that. Relationships are difficult. And if you are like me, we don't handle that very well. When relationships get hard and they're difficult and they're fraught like that, when we get deeply disappointed by someone who we thought we could trust, I don't know about you, but I get really mad. And I get very on my high horse about it too, I have to admit. Does any of you do this? You think, I am right, and this other person is wrong, and they need to fix it. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I'm seeing some brave nods. There is that way we get in fraught relationships, when relationships start to break down, where we start to stonewall the other person, and we don't want our hearts to get hurt again. We do that thing where we wait for the other person to realize what they have done wrong. I don't have to tell them, do I? Right? You know what I'm talking about? We get to that point where we become so critical of the person. Even if we never say anything from our lips, our heart becomes so poisoned with resentment, with our lack of forgiveness, that even if they did come and say they were sorry, sometimes I don't think we would hear them very much. But despite how hard relationships get, and despite how dark it sometimes becomes, Jesus stands there on the shore as that light of new hope. Jesus stands there, and when Peter comes over, swims over, leaving everyone else behind, leaving all his friends who he's now convinced to go fish. They've caught so many fish they can't leave. Did you notice that? He just abandons them, right? And he gets to the shore. Jesus welcomes him with a meal. And Jesus does something that I think really does rise to the level of godliness. Jesus does not say, Peter, I told you so, which, oh my God, does indeed rise to the level of godliness, if I've ever seen one act. Jesus instead asks this vulnerable question. Think about this. I don't know what it was like for first century Jewish people, but in today's world, two men sitting on the side of the beach, and one man turns to the other and says, "Do you love me?" How tender, vulnerable. This week we were at Gospel Preview, and a gentleman was in the discussion, and he said, I can't picture a time when me and one of my male buddies sat down and some guy turned to me and Jesus doesn't chastise, wag the finger, or shame Peter. All Jesus wants is for the relationship to be healed. Jesus says, what's most important here, Peter, as it has always been, what is the first and great commandment? To love God with all yourself. Which reminds us that God deeply desires to be loved and to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus comes right to the heart of the matter, doesn't get hung up on what used to happen and what it was, and I need you to apologize, and this was wrong, but 3 times asked Peter, just like he denied him 3 times, asked Peter, do you love me? But Jesus doesn't want easy grace, right? Jesus doesn't want to just sort of blow over what used to happen and move on with our lives, because then Jesus tells him, feed my sheep. What Jesus does there is he moves us from the level of healing the relationship to bringing the relationship to wholeness. You know, for Jesus, love is not a feeling. Love is not a warm, gushy heart thing that I get into, right? Jesus doesn't say, write nice letters to my sheep, Peter. Jesus says, feed my sheep. For Jesus, love is a state of action. It's what we do with our lives. It's how we relate to other people. And Jesus says, if you love me, if you want to be back in relationship with me and back in relationship with God, you must follow me and do as I do and to love as I love. You see, my friends, the fraught relationships in your life, they're hard, they're difficult, and they're painful. I don't have a magic wand that's going to fix them, and neither does Jesus. But what Jesus invites you to and invites me to is that if we are serious about escaping the pattern of making enemies out of others, judging others, chastising and shaming others, the only way out is to seek healing and wholeness, to seek love and to embody such love out into the world.